So, you think you want to homestead? Well, there's a lot of things you need to know before you get started. Things that people don't tell you, and things that established farmers might have completely forgotten about. I recently made the move from a city home to a countryside homestead, and there were many surprises. Some I was ready for, and others not so much. And I am here to turn your attention to the things I believe you absolutely need to know before you make the jump into homesteading. Now, a nice organized list is always ideal, but a lot of these things are interconnected. So I'm going to start with number one of important points and just flow from there. So there might not be a numbered list to speak of, so just sit back and listen and you'll get the whole story. But of course we will start with number one, as it is the most important aspect of homesteading. Defining a goal. What is your homesteading goal? This is important because it'll ripple into everything else we talk about one way or another. Is the plan to raise animals? Grow food? Raise bees for honey? How about growing trees? Maybe being self-sustainable, or making a petting zoo? Having a horse barn? Defining your goal is very important, and it's okay if that goal changes, but you need to have a place to start. Different goals have different requirements. Do you just want to have a small garden? Small gardens don't take much land, and you can do that with an acre, or you could do it with 10 acres. It's quite flexible. You can work within your means with a garden. Maybe you want to raise chickens. Once again, that can be done with a small amount of land, and many places have flexible zoning for backyard chickens. But there's more on zoning later. However, if you want a flock of sheep, have cattle, or raise horses, you're going to need a few dozen acres of land minimum. Easily look into how much land specific animals require. And let me tell you now, when it comes to livestock, they'll always need more land than you think they do. It's very important you don't overcrowd an area, so the goal of raising livestock comes with a very unique set of challenges. Can you afford that much property? How far are you willing to go to find it? City land is expensive, and it isn't often zoned for animals. Country land is cheaper, but you'll have the extra expense of commuting. That'll lead us right into the next point. And number two, how far are you willing to commute? You need to know right off the bat. Most homesteaders keep their day jobs, and unless your goal above was to become self-sufficient and profitable, you're going to need to drive to work. Depending on your other goals, you will not be finding 10 plus acres of affordable land within city limits. Therefore, you'll most likely be commuting. Already have a good farm truck? Wonderful! That 10 to 15 mile per gallon truck will cost you a fortune to drive to work. Maybe you already have a fuel-efficient vehicle. Better yet, but that car won't be very helpful for dragging cattle around. These are all expenses you must consider. Not only that, you're going to need to factor in what your time is worth. Will your current 10-minute commute become a 2-hour daily event? How much time are you willing to spend driving? Figure that out first and stick to your guns. In your property hunt, you'll no doubt find a ton of good farm properties, but make sure that you aren't driving too far to cause burnout before you even get to enjoy your little slice of heaven. But that isn't even the only aspect of commuting you must consider. What about your customers? Plan to sell garden veggies on a roadside stand? Does your new home sit on a road that's even likely to be driven by? Well, maybe you plan to drive the products in a market. How far a commute is that? Can you recoup your cost of travel even? What is your target market? Does it live in your area? Not a lot of young people stick around the country. You might need to head into the city, if there's even one nearby. Do you plan on slaughtering animals for meat? Are there local butchers? Is there even a local market for your meat? Is there anybody to buy the products that you have planned in your goal? Maybe you don't plan to commute. Maybe somebody in your family will stay home. You need to do a cost analysis of whether or not it's financially feasible to have that type of income cut. Even if you believe your homestead will be profitable, it's very unlikely to be profitable anytime soon. There will be a huge setup required, not to mention setup fees that are largely overlooked. Do you plan to have a fence? Are you aware of the cost to install even the cheapest fence around just a couple acres run into the thousands? Maybe you don't need a fence. Maybe you won't be raising animals. How will you keep deer away from your vegetables? How will you keep raccoons away? Maybe a guard dog. They also cost a fortune. Do you have experience in training a guard dog? Puppies don't come trained, and it's not natural in them to have all the abilities necessary to guard your flock or your vegetables. They aren't born knowing to protect. Do you know that one of the most common issues with a guard dog owner is their dog eating the very animals they are guarding? How will you deal with that? Okay, let's move on to number 3, and it is a very easily overlooked aspect for a homestead hunt: land zoning. City land isn't typically zoned for farms. In fact, they are barely zoned for anything. Backyard chickens are often even off the table. You need to take a good hard look at your goals and find zoning that matches it. Almost every place will allow a garden, but livestock is a much harder process. And bees? Better check your local laws. What are the rules on noise? What about a barking dog that's guarding your property? What about cattle? Oh, and do you need a permit? All these things need to be researched ahead of time. How far away from work can you find a zone that matches your goals? Is that commute too much? Will you go bankrupt trying to make that drive daily? Alright, so taking into consideration your goals, the commute you're willing to make, and zoning, now let's talk about available land and pricing. You know what you want to do. You know what zoning you need to do it in, and you know where that zoning is. Well, how affordable is that area? Is there much land available there? How much can you save by going slightly farther out of your comfort commuting zone? What if the perfect place is a bit smaller than you envisioned? Once you factor in all the previous topics, you can start isolating exactly what you're looking for and start viewing properties. Often places won't be exactly what you want. They'll be too expensive, too small, too old, and too wet. That is very important to look out for. But in my opinion, it's always better to spend a little more and go a little bigger rather than to settle for something a little too small. Remember, you can always make more money, but you can't raise animals or products on lands you don't have. That's something to consider. Those points are very important for everybody to take into consideration. Now we'll move on to a few points that may or may not be important depending on your goals. You need to know your growing zone. You need to know what will grow in the zone you live in. Want to start growing pineapple? Well, you should probably know you aren't going to be doing that in northern Canada. If that is your goal, it's important to look at what's even achievable in the climate you live in. But even if you plan to raise livestock, grow zones are still important, as you'll need to grow the right grass for your animals to forage on. Next up, animal availability. Do you plan on raising goats? Sheep? That's wonderful. Where are you going to get them? Some random guy up the road? Do you know what specific kind of goat, and you should, depending on your goals, that you're looking to raise? Not all animals are available everywhere, and they're hugely expensive to get some in certain places, and it's simply not worth the price. To be practical, you should research your market ahead of time. A Google or Kijiji search, or even a visit to a local farm might help you get a little insight into what's available in the area you live in or plan to move to. And that's it for the most very basic points and things you need to know before you start a homestead. These are the things that are very quickly overlooked when you start thinking about the wonderful animals and the gorgeous products you plan to grow. You can't grow all products everywhere, and you can't grow or raise anything without the land. The land is going to be farther out than you expect and is always going to cost more. So make sure you stick to your goals, you know exactly what you want, and your house hunt or your farm hunt will be that much easier. Thank you.